please check out my revised website at creationsciencefiction.com. It's a great resource now for answering creationist claims. There's also documentaries, lectures, my blog, and more. Like my Facebook page too, and if you want to support what I'm doing, you can become a contributor at patreon.com. In this video, instead of looking at the more popular creationist salesmen like Ken Ham or Kent Hovind, we're going to take a look at the grassroots, the guys at the church level who talk about creation versus evolution. I ran across the video channel of Steve Waldron, who's the pastor of New Life of Albany, Pentecostal Church in Albany, Georgia. Pastor Steve makes a lot of videos, sometimes a couple a day, and we're going to take a look at what he teaches about human origins.
Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here, and we're in our book, Creation versus Evolution by Arlo Molenpaw. And I just thought I wanted to bring in some specifics. I've done this a few different times on the creation-evolution debate because his chapters are so succinct, just anywhere from 2 to 4 pages normally, but so packed with information that I think is extremely important. And so this is a copy of the book. I'd highly recommend you get this book. I say, I'm a Pentecostal, I'm Oneness Apostolic, but regardless, this is the best introduction to creation science I've ever seen.
Well, is succinct a good way to describe it, or is it really just lacking a lot of critical information and facts?
So let's look at what he has to say on the human origins. Okay, so he's got to think, why is physical anthropology so heavily influenced by subjective factors? Now, Dr. Molenpaw got a doctor of chemistry. He's still teaching. He's in his 80s, still doing good. So he's got a quote on here by Dr. Derek Ager, former president of the British Geological Association, and he said practically every evolutionary story he had learned as a student has now been debunked. That's just right. I've actually done a video on hominoids and this type thing. And so here are some so-called prehistoric men that have been debunked. Ramapithecus. The suffix pithecus means ape. And just good information like that. This fossil was found in India, 1932. Time Life Books claim that Ramapithecus is now thought by some experts to be the oldest of man's ancestors in the direct line, and on and so forth.
Elwyn Simons was a great primatologist, but some of these fossils that were discovered 50 to 100 years ago and classified back then weren't really correct, and we now have a lot of great information and a better understanding of where they fit in the family tree. It certainly doesn't mean that they all are wrong.
That Ramapithecus routinely walking almost as upright as a man, yet the fossil consisted of only a jaw and a teeth. So how could they tell that from jaw and teeth? Most experts now concede that Ramapithecus was merely an extinct form of the orangutan. Orthodontists have shown that the jaw angulation is an unreliable indicator of relative humanness and should not be the determining factor in deciding whether jawbone is from a human or an ape.
Well, that part's correct, and Ramapithecus has now been reassigned to Civipithecus, and it's considered an ancestor of modern orangutans.
So, Nebraska man, Piltdown man, Peking man, Australopithecus. That's one I do want to read you because that's one of the more popular ones.
Well, here we go, right out of the Creationist Playbook. This book was published in 2011, and instead of looking at modern evidence for human evolution, they got to talk about Nebraska man and Piltdown man, and I can't wait to hear about Australopithecus.
Okay, Australopithecus literally means southern ape. In Ethiopia in 1971, one Australopithecus afarensis skeleton was discovered about 40% complete by Donald Johanson. He named it Lucy, after a girl mentioned in a Beatles song, Lucy and the Sky with Diamonds. And that's right, you'd have to be delusional to believe it, because that was a euphemism for LSD.
Well, it was 1974, not 1971, but yeah, she was 40% complete. And comparing any of this to an LSD trip is just straight out of the Kent Hovind playbook.
So everyone agrees that from the neck up, Lucy was a gorilla-like. Also from the neck down, nearly every creature was non-human. Lucy was not a human ancestor. At best, she was a form of extinct ape. At worst, she was a combination of 2 or 3 species. She is still touted as one of the best evidences for human evolution. Today, these animals are no longer considered ancestors of man, but instead are a variety of extinct ape.
Well, that's just not true. I mean, there's nothing gorilla-like about Lucy's upper body. And yes, they are considered an extinct ape, but they are still considered ancestral to the genus Homo.
So, I still see references to Lucy all the time, and it's an extinct ape. Java man, another huge hoax. Neanderthal man.
Well, Java man is considered Homo erectus, although it has been reclassified a time or two since it was initially discovered, but there's no hoax associated with it at all. We're understanding Neanderthals more and more all the time, and there's no excuse for writing a book in 2011 and calling them Neanderthal man and saying that they're a hoax. It's almost as though the main research for this book was done with chick tracts. I managed to find a little information on the author of this book, and as recently as 2013, he was still teaching that Neanderthals were just modern humans that suffered from disease.
What are the evidence of the origin of man reconstructions based? Why don't we find more human fossils? Why do people continue to claim that they found fossils of human ancestors? A lot of it is monetary. So, great book. That was just a little brief overview of a particular chapter in there on the various fraudulent claims of ape man, and there just aren't any. So Adam and Eve were not monkey. Somebody's trying to make a monkey out of you by saying that.
Pastor Waldron seems like a nice enough guy, but the book he's using to teach his congregation is just terrible. He manages to avoid mentioning over 95% of the evidence we actually have for human evolution, and much of this evidence was discovered before 2011 when the book was published. We now have an almost unbroken chain of human evolution going back 7 million years, and enough pieces of the puzzle before that to know when we diverged from other primates. The solid evidence we have for the last 4 million years is overwhelming, and I've yet to see any creationist discuss it or address it in any meaningful way.